Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 6 of Heroes Journey, the official podcast on CBR dedicated to all things comics and superheroes. My name is Sean. That is Sierra. And Sierra, who do we have this week on the show?
This week we spoke to Evan Narcisse, the writer of Batman Static Beyond. We hope you enjoy.
Evan, the point of the Heroes Journey podcast is to get to know comics creators, what got them to this point, sort of the steps of their journey. I want to go all the way back. If you can even remember who gave you your very first comic book, who started you down this path, or was it like a spinner rack or something that you stumbled upon?
Yeah, it was probably a spinner rack somewhere in 1970s Brooklyn or 1980s Long Island. No, it was definitely Brooklyn. My first comic book memories start with Superman, and specifically the 78 Christopher Reeve movie. So my earliest memories reading anything were comics. An old Superman collection, like the small digests that collected a bunch of stories from throughout his publishing history. Yeah, I remember there was one themed around magic. Every time he faced like a magical threat, and there was stuff from like the 40s on through like the 70s probably. Anyway, that's one of my earliest comic book reading memories. But yeah, I basically learned to read off comics, and you know, I was a child of Haitian immigrants raised by my mom as a single parent, and she wasn't down with comics, so she wasn't like, "Oh, of course you can have some more." It was like, to add to my collection was a fight almost every time, and they were basically contraband, and I was, you know, picking them up on the DL when I had my own money when I was old enough.
Because they weren't serious enough, or?
Yeah, definitely. They weren't serious enough. She thought of them as frivolous and juvenile. You know, she didn't engage with them in any meaningful way. So like, yeah. You know, I'm not surprised. She didn't realize that the craft of the form was growing and evolving and changing in front of my eyes. You know, I came up like in the 70s, 80s, 90s when like I said, the very craft, the mechanics, the thematics of superhero storytelling was like deepening like on a weekly, monthly basis. And she wasn't, sure. You know, she wasn't privy to that. I remember that the first time I saw the word vicissitudes, which is like an SAT word about changing fortunes and changing times, was in I want to say it was a Captain America annual. Anyway, it was like the first page of the comic with a little footnote with the definition of the word. And I'm like, I could have told Mom, hey, I learned this word from reading this comic, so ha. But she, again, that was a non-starter. But anyway, like those are my early kind of fights to live my life out proud as a comic book reading nerd in my household.
Good for you. I love it.
Extremely relatable. This was, I came home once to find my mom had like, and my parents had like brought out my box of comics from under my bed, and they were like, they truly sat me down like they had found drugs. Like, what is this? Why do you feel like you need to hide this from us? It was it's extremely relatable.
I definitely have the horror stories of my mom ripping up my comics and throwing them in the trash bag. So yeah, we can't remember. We don't want to catalog the crimes that were committed that day. There were definitely some Dave Cockrum X-Men in there, which hurt badly. Some other stuff I can't remember, but yeah. And when Milestone Media came out in 1993, I was in college, and that meant the world to me to see like these 4 black comics creators. These guys came together and created a universe that felt like the world I was moving through as a young man, right? Like it was deeply multicultural. The references to hip hop and youth culture and fashion and music felt like they were of the moment. You know, writing teenagers in any kind of fiction is always hard because if you're an adult who has the life experience to get a job as a screenwriter or a comic book writer or whatever, you're probably way past your teenage years, right? So your references can be dated. You don't get how teens like walk, talk, and dress all the time. But those guys got it. I remember the first issue of Static like had him playing Mortal Kombat against his dad. And I was like, oh snap, Mortal Kombat, the game that almost made me flunk out of college. These guys get it.
How did you come to write comics? Because you started as an interviewer, right? I wonder if you wanted to tell that story.
Yeah, so my background is in journalism. I went to NYU in the 90s, and had a double major of poli-sci. Actually, no, a majored in poli-sci and double minored, if that's even a thing, but like in journalism and Africana studies. So yeah, my professional career started in journalism, and I wrote about pop culture both basically at every outlet I freelanced for and was on staff at. And yeah, I was a guy who wrote about comics and video games and animation and movies at places like Kotaku, IO9, and The Atlantic, New York Times. But it wasn't until 2016, I want to say, where an editor at Marvel reached out to me through Ta-Nehisi Coates and said, hey, do you think you want to write some comics for us? And that turned into Rise of the Black Panther. And people were like, oh, we've noticed you wrote about comics. You've been writing about comics. You want to write comics. And so some other opportunities presented themselves. Also in, the video game world where, my day job as a narrative designer. I contributed to a bunch of games like the Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales. They make you say it like that. My switch happened like about 7-8 years ago. Gosh, is it 9? It's more like 8-9 years ago at this point. Yeah, and Rise of the Black Panther came out right before the movie. First issue came out in January of 2018. And I've been writing comics ever since, which still feels like a wild thing to say. But I've been lucky enough to, get some good gigs from time to time.
I want to talk to you about your pairing of Batman Beyond and Static Shock, because these are shows that Batman Beyond specifically it missed me. Like when that show came around, I was starting to work. I was getting into journalism like you and just grinding away. So I was really late to the story. And I was wondering, did you follow it as well too? Were you close to it, or is it something you had to come back around and learn more?
No, I watched it in real time. Sean, I'm guessing we're around the same age. I'm 53.
I'm 51.
Yeah. So I was working at the time, and it was hard to be like a working adult and watching cartoons, which were still coming on Saturday morning, I think, right? But Batman Beyond, Saturday mornings are rough when you're an adult working, folks. Either you have a job that keeps you on the hook, or you're exhausted and sleeping in. And we couldn't just go on the internet and watch stuff back then.
I was doing graveyard shift at USA Today. I was 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. So I was not getting up in the morning to watch Batman cartoons.
With Batman Beyond, I definitely paid attention. Like many of us of a certain age, I was a huge fan of Batman the Animated Series, right? Like that came out and changed everything about how we thought that stuff could be adapted and interpreted for a different medium. And when Batman Beyond came out, I was like, huh. I remember watching it and being like, this is a big swing, because one of the strengths of Batman the Animated Series and the Superman show and some of the other stuff in the DC animated universe is they had the scaffolding of already published stories to build off of, right? And the characters and the archetypes and their kind of long evolving changes throughout their publishing histories. So you always felt like, okay, I'm watching a new interpretation of something that I already know. Batman Beyond was totally different in terms of they threw out almost everything, like Terry wasn't rich, his origin had some kind of thematic similarities to Bruce's, but from personality perspective, he was not like Bruce at all. And that includes like his training, which he had almost none. He was going off raw instinct and emotion, and that's pretty much everything that Bruce trained himself not to do, right? And if you acted that way when you were under his tutelage, he kind of like gave you little marks, right? Like I'm thinking of people like Jason Todd and even his own son, Damian, right? Like he's like, nah, you're too hot-headed right now. Let's calm it down. And Terry was that kid, Terry was that kid. So I was intrigued from that standpoint, and then everything else about the world, right? This is like cyberpunk, cool, edgy, like slick modality that Batman Beyond operated in, which was again totally different than the dark deco style of Batman the Animated Series, right? Where like you knew what the references were there, especially with like the 1980s movies, the Tim Burton movies. having established that kind of aesthetic, but this was something different. It felt like, oh, okay, this isn't even an evolution of the old Gotham. Them calling it Neo-Gotham lets you know that, yeah, things are totally different. So yeah, I paid attention early on, and when you think about those first couple of seasons, they didn't dip into Bruce's rogues gallery and history very much, right? I remember the episode, the Ra's al Ghul episode, where we're like, oh snap, they're going there. And obviously the Return of the Joker movie and all that other stuff. When they went there, they made it meaningful. They had supporting characters like Barbara as police commissioner, but like it really felt like a complete reimagination of what it meant to be Batman in a different era, and again with a different vibe, and that alone had me hooked. And later on, you grow up and you start to learn about the talent behind the show, like Darwin Cook being one of the visual architects of that world. Obviously, when I became a fan of his later on, like it made total sense. But you didn't know that you were looking at like already masters at the creative peak, adding to the storied history of, obviously an already illustrious mythos.
You're coming into this Beyond world and you're bringing Static Shock into that. What is that guiding principle, the idea behind bringing these two characters together? Yeah,
so, I mean, the origin story for this project really starts with Nicholas Draper Ivey, one of my artistic collaborators on this book. A couple of years ago, he did a short story in the Milestone 30th anniversary special, which was called Static Beyond. And it was basically, Virgil Hawkins, aka Static, as a grown-up, having a quick adventure with Terry McGinnis, who's a teenager. And that was a great story. And, Nick's obviously a super talented storyteller, an amazing artist. And he wanted to do more. I think there was probably some hunger on the part of fans to see more. And so this thing eventually got greenlit at DC. And Nick asked me to come on and help tell the story. And it was very meaningful because, again, even though I was like not in the sweet spot of like being grade school or high school and watching these shows coming up, both of them meant a lot to me, especially Static. Static Shock the cartoon was an outgrowth of the character's publishing history as part of Milestone Media. So, when the Static Shock cartoon came on, even though I was too old for it, like by far, I still had all this pride knowing that this character made a leap that so many comic book characters don't get to do, right? Think of all the great superheroes who haven't had an adaptation like as the main role, right? And then you add stuff like Phil Lamar, like really making Virgil sound like a teenager who you could like be annoyed with, but also want to be saved with by, I should say, too. Like, yeah, Static was really great. So the idea of putting these characters together in a new story felt like the fulfillment of a collective desire, right? The people who grew up with these characters are all adults now, right? And they have fond memories of the shows and the comics. And, what Nick and I and Miguel are doing is trying to synthesize all that love and that pining away into a story that like really feels like we're fulfilling the kind of like feedback loop of comics to animation and back to comics, and bring them together with some, I think, hopefully more evolved sensibilities and understandings.
Evan, I'm looking around at my desk in front of me and I'm seeing my cell phone, and obviously we're talking on a laptop, and I read my comics on a tablet. And what is your relationship with technology? How is it informing this story? And is there a piece of technology that come hell or high water you just can't do without?
I mean, sadly, Sean, I'm addicted to my phone like everybody else is, right? It's not a healthy, happy addiction, right? It's, bootleg cyborg vibes over here, where like you probably can't survive without it, but it's hurting as much as it's probably helping. So that said, my phone. This story is very much one about folks' relationship to technology. As much as we depend on it in our daily lives, we are, bereft sometimes like catastrophically so, when we don't have the tech we rely on, right? And that's exactly the scenario that these characters are going to be facing in the story. The thing that kicks things off is, Virgil's desire to help the city of Dakota and the whole Earth, which is, facing what we call in the first issue like a slow death, right? Like if you think about all the kind of ecological complications that are making our lives scarier by the minute today in real life 2025, the story is set in a indistinct point in the future, but all those things have gotten worse, right? We have one character in the first issue who doesn't like this. He's protesting these developments. There's a new energy grid infrastructure being deployed across the world, which Static was part of helping develop. And he's like, yeah, nah, we're going to protest this thing coming to Gotham, right? Things happen, of course, which I will leave for the reader to discover. But the end result is a global blackout, plunging Earth back to the Dark Ages, let's say. And yeah, these characters' relationships to technology are totally different. You have Static as somebody who got his powers from, let's just say, tech misuse, right? There was an experimental tear gas with an element called Q juice inside of it that gave him and a bunch of other characters their powers. Sometimes, horrific transformations resulted as a result of exposure to that. So that's Static, but he also goes on to be somebody who helps redeem technology or what it can be used for. Terry as Batman has a, super sophisticated bat suit that he uses to, step into Bruce's role and become the Dark Knight of tomorrow. And Melvin is a character who hates all of this, almost, right? He feels like technology has made people's lives become more rigid, less interesting, less wondrous, and more disconnected. In the first issue, we show his parents, entering a workspace in their home that seals them off from him completely for hours. And if he doesn't catch that window, he's not able to talk to them. And you think about that being replicated every day, every week, every month, every year, and you're going to have somebody who's pretty maladjusted and susceptible to the kind of propaganda that would engender a deep hatred of all these systems.
We were just having a conversation. My wife works in elementary education, and we were discussing the kids who go home and don't have adult interaction, right? And it's not through their choice. It's the choice of the adults who are on technology and not giving personal time to kids. And that broke my heart, like in a way that I can't even express, it just feels like it's a reality that too many families are dealing with right now.
Yeah, one of the subtextual pillars of this story very much is like alienation by virtue of the modern technology that we use every day, right? And not just alienation, when you're alienated from the social systems that would give your life meaning, you are ripe for being manipulated by misinformation and disinformation. And again, we're not driving it too hard in this story, but like that definitely is a plot beat, like Melvin has other people whispering in his ear about this technology, where it comes from, and the dangers it holds, and he latches onto that, right? Because he's already kind of disaffected, and so that message finds fertile ground in his brain, and you can probably guess the transformations that he undergoes across this story, but that's where it starts, right? Like he has the wrong people whispering in his ear and getting the wrong kinds of information, and that sets him off on his path, which is clearly a collision course with Static and Batman.
Cool. So we've talked about social ills, we've talked about youth culture. What are some of the things you feel like do you feel like you revisit some of these themes a lot in your work, or does it feel like it's a fresh page every time?
Yeah, look, I'd be lying if I didn't say like there are certain concerns that keep on popping up in my work, right? representation of Black life is an important one for me. It's something I always wrote about as a critic and journalist, and I continue to do that as somebody now doing creative fiction and work in different fields. I think you have to look at the world when you're writing fiction, not just for inspiration, but like, okay, what is my take on this? How do I feel about, the haves getting heavier, aggregating more wealth and power and influence, and while the numbers of people who like maybe starving, unhoused, or otherwise, under-resourced, the ranks of those people growing, So that's something that concerns me in my day-to-day life. And it's something that concerns me in the work I put out, Like, I don't have the answers, but I think exploring these questions can make for a good story, one, right? A good, entertaining story, but two, help us understand each other and the world we live in, hopefully a little bit better. I'm not saying I'm any kind of like social scientist or anything like that, but like, I know I'm not alone in having these concerns, and hopefully embedding them in like a superhero team up story could activate conversation with other people too.
Evan, you said that your mom didn't appreciate the comic art form, and now you're embedded in it. Do your kids appreciate it?
Yeah, I've got a kid who's big into manga.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
A little bit less of an anime head, but like a huge manga head. More than a passing familiarity with like Western superhero stables. So they definitely know, Captain America and the MCU and major DC characters. There was a period of time where my kid was a huge fan of the Teen Titans animated series, Teen Titans Go specifically, and
which
DC
is hilarious.
Superhero Girls. Yeah, no, yeah. So my kid has definitely benefited from like the ever evolving craft of superhero storytelling, like for all the dominance and supposed superhero fatigue that we hear about nowadays, the thing I think constantly gets lost in all this discourse, and we all know the attention economy is like meant to farm outrage, but like the thing I think constantly gets lost is like the actual craft of comic storytelling, superhero storytelling, is probably better than it ever has been. Like,
absolutely. If
you want like weird deconstructionist, like subversive takes, like you've got people like Dennis Camp and almost everything he's putting out. If you want straight ahead, Silver Age inflected, like superhero stories, like Mark Waid is doing that stuff at the top of his game, like he always has. Like I can name, what Fraction's doing on Batman, Murewa Al-Yadali on Storm, like the list goes on and on. Like we just have so many great people telling so many different kinds of superhero stories, and I don't think we should take that for granted. Like as somebody who read like any number of like disposable villain of the month stories growing up, like where clearly people were just writing to get a paycheck, and I don't fault that stuff, sure. Like but I think the overall you're likely to get a very well told superhero story now when you're picking up something off the stands, and I don't think we should take that for granted.
Yeah, no, it's true. It feels like the industry's fallen into the hands of proper stewards who kind of grew up on a certain period.
You've given us a really great list to pull from. Great reading list, which I appreciate. I wanted to ask you about, because I'm a very big fan of, as you said, Marvel's Spider-Man. Miles Morales is the full title, the official title, I believe. Because Sean and I have talked about this a little bit, but that's a game that's very like I love that game. I play it. It's a game me and my brother played together, and I was wondering about if you could talk about your contributions to the game and how do you decide which aspects of his story to focus on, because Ultimate Spider-Man is like it's such a huge world, and now we also have Into the Spider-Verse and so many iterations and directions you could take this character.
I think what I was able to bring to the game was a sense of like the culture of New York, what it meant to grow up as like a young African American man in the city. Like moving from one part to another was something that I experienced, and that's the arc that Miles experiences in the game. Yeah, so, I was bought in from early stage, like a pre-production stage, walked through the story, I gave feedback, they told me what the kind of narrative structure they were envisioning was, and, invited me to, like, contribute to, like, 2 of the kind of side quest storylines. The time capsule storyline is almost all me, where you're swinging around the city and finding the different things that Miles and his childhood friend had hidden in time capsules all across. And there's a game design, a level design component to that where you want to send players across the map to these different locations and get them used to like all the different acrobatic moves and power and parts of Miles' power set that you can do. But there's also the storytelling standpoint. It's like, okay, we're going to use this to illustrate his closeness to this character who, spoiler for like a 5-7-year-old game, winds up becoming his arch enemy in the game. But like, we want to show like, hey, they were close together, like really close. So that part was me and the Harlem neighborhood side quest where you're meeting different characters around the neighborhood that Miles has just moved into. That I contributed heavily to that as well. So and just overall feedback across the game, specific scenes, like, implemented some of my feedback, and it was really a team effort. But like, it was my first piece of like major AAA video game work, and all these years later, I'm still really proud of it. Miles is like a really special character to me too, because these superhero legacy mantles, like, it gets so complicated and fraught when other people embody them. But I feel like Miles is just like, the fact that he can be Spider-Man 2, I think makes Peter look cooler. You know what I'm saying? I've said often in interviews of the past, like, I feel like Miles is cooler than Peter. And that's just what our sense of what a teenager is and can be is different than 1960, 1, 2, whenever Amazing Fantasy number 15 came out. I don't know the exact year. But yeah, that's been like, 40, 50 some odd years, had passed by the time Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pichelli created Miles' character, right? So like, how we understand teenagers has changed. So it's not, a ding on Peter to say that Miles, I think, is cooler. But like, here's the thing. Peter, whatever the continuity is,
Peter's a nerd. He's not supposed to be cool.
They're both nerds. But the thing is, Peter being a grown-up who still has the old Parker luck, which complicates his life in so many ways. But him being like, you know what? I'm gonna let you ride. I'm gonna let you be sharing this. We're gonna be partners. We're gonna be buddies. We're gonna be mentor and protege. However we're gonna frame the relationship. He could have said no and be like, "Go away, kid. You bother me." Right? No, he could have been that dude, but he's not. He's like, "Hey, this kid has all this potential. Let me make sure, he grows up, and I'll teach him the ropes." And implicit in that is like he might surpass Peter, and I think that's really cool. And Peter is no slouch himself, right? Like, he's grown and evolved as a character all these years. So I think this, I'll call it symbiotic, even though Venom is a thing. But the symbiotic relationship between them is, I think, so great. And when you see it in stories like Spider-Man or in the Spider-Man 2 video game, like, I love them as a tandem together. So, and I think one of the things about, again, these legacy superhero characters is like, the more robust their ecosystem is in a variety of different modes, like the healthier, it all is. Like, to talk about Batman, I was a kid who grew up watching the Adam West show and was like, haha, it's corny, goofy, campy, but like, I still go laughing. And, it was the only kind of like live action, moving images on the screen, superhero stuff that I could engage with for a while, right? And then you get older and you're like, that was kid stuff. I'm moving past it. And then you get older still and you're like, you know what? What Adam West called the bright knight, like that shiny, happy, well-adjusted, can actually have a conversation version of Batman, like, is as important to the overall like architecture of the Bat mythos as like the grimdark stuff that we all take for granted. Like, it is really refreshing to be like, yeah, he's gonna speak in a complete sentence and acknowledge somebody's emotional state and help them through whatever they're dealing with, versus being like,
I mean, that was what was so beautiful about the Batman animated series and Batman Beyond, is that he was allowed to have this depth of character and this deep empathy. And that is so core to these characters to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to save the world, fight, injustice, and all the other things we expect superheroes to do, like caring about, the people in your city, in your community, in your world is an important part of it. I think it's been there. It's part of the roots of the genre from the beginning. I'll say it I'm blue in the face. The first appearance of Superman, he's hanging a corrupt politician off a power line. And he's busting into an apartment where a woman is, and intervening in a domestic violence situation, and smacking the guy around and being like, "How do you like it?" These things have been core to the genre since the very beginning, and I think we can complicate that stuff, we can interrogate it, subvert it, reimagine it, but I think helping your fellow man is part of the mission that these characters were made for.
All right, you have tossed a softball right down the line for me to end on this one then, Evan, and we'll both say thank you so much for your time. But you get a chance to write Terry, and you've written for Bruce Wayne already. You've put your fingerprints on Batman. But do you get a chance to do older Bruce? Can we expect to see older Bruce as part of your storyline eventually? What are you comfortable teasing?
He's in there. I think he's in there in not too different a way that he was in Batman Beyond. Like not always the main driver of a story, but there to be a commentator, there to show you the contrast between him and Terry's takes. And, that's also enlivened by Virgil's presence, like to Terry's mind, Virgil and Bruce are just two old people who don't get it and don't get him. And I think one other thing that's important about these characters, their backgrounds is this is very much a story that's rooted in the places that made them, right? So Virgil is an adult who grew up being tear gassed and getting, electrical superpowers as an accident, right? And watching his whole city transform by this act of let's just say institutional violence. And the things he wants to do for his city and the world are very different than what Terry wants. Terry grew up in Gotham City, which is very much like a dog eat dog, the rich and the wealthy run the city. And his journey starts with revenge, right? More like a personal motivation than Virgil's. And I think they have very outlooks on what it means to do the same job. So Bruce is there to be like, stand up for yourself, but also figure out the right thing to do. So he's in there. Not a lot. We really want to focus on the dynamic between Static and Terry and showing readers, hey, you've seen what Gotham City looks like in the future as Neo-Gotham. Here's what Dakota looks like. Here's, stuff from the Milestone mythologies that show up and intermingle with the DCAU stuff. So I think it's going to be a real grab bag of fun and streams crossing. And there's some stuff that I can't tease, but if you know these characters and where they come from, I think you'll be pretty happy.
All right. The book is Batman Static Beyond, and it's available right now. So go out and grab it. Thanks, Evan, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I'm not sure if you even heard that this has even happened yet, but as part of this way to sort of push the DC universe's digital comics, these there's no way to sort of describe it except for these scrolling comics. It's a new way to read comics digitally. They're trying to get another team up going that's behind the Batman Deadpool one that they announced, and there's going to be two more coming. One is Fantastic Four and The Flash, which is going to be another sort of Marvel and DC crossover, and then a big one that I think fans are going to be looking forward to that, again, you can really only read in this digital format, is Thor and Shazam. I remember growing up, there was an incredible comic that was Spider-Man and Superman as a crossover, which, blew my mind as a kid. I never thought I'd see a team up like that of the two different companies. Does that excite you at all? Or is that something that you run out to grab because it has characters like that together?
I mean, it's always exciting to see sort of I'm all about the power dynamics and the push and pull. So as soon as you get a crossover, it's always really interesting to sort of see what gets focused on, because I feel like it's such a microcosm of what the editorial teams value in their brands at that
Yeah.
exact moment. And so I feel like it's like, honestly, I feel like I'm learning when I read them. In addition to kind of like the childish excitement of like, you know, what would happen if these two fought, you know? The classic comic book arguments.
Well, yeah, no, that gets us to what Scott Snyder, a recent guest on the show, was talking about with the DCKO line. And I've seen a lot of people pick up our story from talking to Scott about how we are inevitably in the KO series going to get Superman versus Homelander, which seems like a really wild team up. And then one thing that he said to me too that I got really excited, he's like, hey, if you want to see Red Hood get justice on the Joker, you know, for the death in the family storyline, we're going to resolve that too. So when they're plot driven, I think they're kind of cool.
There's like the meta narrative of it all is always so interesting.
The other item that we wanted to get to, which is going to springboard into our fun game for this week, is news that had Sierra and I both a little bit rolling our eyes, if we're being honest. Maybe you've changed your mind on it. I'm not sure.
You know, I don't know how to react to it. It's one of those things where it's like just a series of question marks all around my head. But okay, share the news. Let us know.
Yeah, to bring people into the fold, earlier this week, from when you guys are listening to it, there was confirmation that James Gunn's Superman film, which was, a success for DC. It got the DC universe off the ground from a feature film standpoint, at least, and is already leading into Man of Tomorrow, which we know is going to be a Superman and Lex Luthor type team up, is going to inspire a television show or an HBO Max series for streaming that is going to be based on the Jimmy Olsen character that was introduced in the film, and to me had a bit of a comedic sidebar on his relationship with Miss Tessmacher. And I'm not saying that it didn't work, but there was enough of it in the movie where I was like, all right, we can move on from this. Like, let's get back into the action a bit. So I don't know if I want a series dedicated to the adventures of Jimmy Olsen. Primarily when you put it this way, Sierra, you and I were listing off the number of characters that do not have projects on the horizon in this DCU. And James Gunn keeps going into his toy box of familiar characters from the world that he's already introduced and seems to be not quite exploiting them, but maybe overusing them is the term.
I mean, it could be a winning strategy. It's like it's like the backdoor pilot. You already have people who care about this character, who are invested, who I've been watching Skylar's career for a really long time. And so I've been waiting for, I just knew he was going to be a breakout character from the show. I mean, from the movies. But it is not a true crime investigation of Grodd is not, that's what it is, right?
Yes.
Is not what I would have had on my bingo card.
So now we don't know anything about this. If it's a procedural where like every episode is a new villain, I'm a little bit more on board with this than if it's a Peacemaker type, deal where there's a story arc that has to be followed, that you have to sort of adhere to. I wouldn't mind if they're doing its NCIS, DC universe, and it's a different, different villain every single week. That's a quick way to introduce new sort of B-tier villains, into the universe by making them the feature of, of an episode. That's a little bit more intriguing to me than what, but we don't know. We don't know what we're necessarily getting from it.
Yeah, it's, I guess it's true. I don't know what to say because I feel like I don't know what the elevator pitch of this is. I don't know what.
Yeah.
If someone had pitched Guardians of the Galaxy, for example, as like I remember what happened when everyone's like, yeah, the upcoming adaptation is going to be Guardians. And it's like, Guardians? What the hell is that? And if you weren't a comic reader, what the hell is that? It's a talking raccoon. There's a tree but then it works. And so I was sort of like, I don't want to show my whole ass and then just be totally wrong. But it did inspire some questions of what our game is going to be. Which is...
Well, yeah. So what it got us to do is to put together some proposals or pitches. Like if anything goes in the DC universe, which it almost feels like that's the case. And if major characters like Batman and Wonder Woman are sidelined, for the time being, while James Gunn continues to exercise his characters and his toys. Sierra and I thought it'd be kind of fun to put a few pitches together of things, really weird things that we'd like to see it happen in the DC universe. And to give them an idea of how bizarre this is going to get, Sierra, I'd love for you to go first. What's a dream project? You're sitting across from James Gunn and Peter Safran, and they have a blank check, and they're telling you, here's the story that you're going to go tell. What would you like to do?
Oh, the question of what's my weirdest DC spinoff. I'm a big Survivor fan. I love Survivor is one of those like really incredible. I'm not a big reality TV show person. I will watch the hell out of. I'm slowly making my way through. Almost 50 seasons. We're coming up on an anniversary, and one of the greatest, famously one of the greatest. I know, because they do two seasons a year. Famously, one of the greatest seasons of Survivor is Heroes versus Villains. And so I fully just want Survivor, but with a tribe of DC heroes and a tribe of DC villains. And only one will be the sole survivor and walk away with $1 million given to them by a jury of their peers, which is, as anyone who has not seen Survivor, the jury of your peers is the people you voted off. And so you have to win the respect of both the heroes and the villains in order to win.
I kind of love that. It's not too bad. It might be a little bit what Peacemaker Season 2 set up with this prison in an alternate universe. If we dump a lot of metahumans into that realm, you could get a face-off where it's heroes versus villains on an island. All right, I'm gonna go with my most serious then, and mine is I like those. I'm a sucker for cooking shows, and I love to just kind of watch people go into kitchens, chop up different stuff, prepare meals. And I would watch a show that followed. So we got an Alfred Pennyworth show that got into his origin stories as a super spy. I don't care about that. I want Alfred who's tending to Wayne Manor in the times when Bruce is out of the house. Like when Bruce is off on adventures, what does Alfred do to keep himself busy? I want Alfred in the kitchen. I want to see Alfred going through old family recipes, exploring the Wayne mythology through Alfred's take in the kitchen. Maybe it's boring, but I love the mundane. And,
is it Martha Stewart, but with Alfred as Martha Stewart?
More Paula Deen, maybe like a Paula Deen type thing.
Okay.
Or it would be more sophisticated like that. Who is the what is her name?
Barefoot Contessa.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's exactly what I was going for. Where there's a modicum of grace, to this. And then like you're invested in an Alfred episode and then gets disrupted because he's got to go help Master Wayne, patch up some sutures, to a wound in his shoulder. And then he's like, oh, we'll come right back to the roast, and then and they come back and they finish up a dish. But that's me selfishly wanting Alfred to do cool stuff around the kitchen.
Okay, my next one is actually I think this might be a genuine pitch. I was like, I started as a joke, but now I'm sort of like, this actually would be good. So Zatanna's father, so for those of you who don't know, the magician, sorceress of the DC universe, was trained by her father, and he's succumbing to dementia, which means that his magic is going haywire, causing ripples in the fabric of reality, and before disappearing completely. Mm-hmm. And so with the help of Mr. Mxyzptlk, Zatara must track him down and undo the changes that he's made to our world.
That's pretty sick.
And I don't mean like timeline stuff. I mean like weird stuff, like where suddenly like a duck is the Pope. Just like weird shit like that.
That is kind of bizarre. We love to do shows where they show you the ending first and then we kind of backpedal to figure out like how do we get to that point. I would like a Dick Grayson show focused heavily on the family as they enter the circus, where at the end of 5 seasons, it's going to be his parents dying and Bruce adopting him. It's almost Gotham, right? Where Gotham led to the origin of Batman, but it's Robin's story. And you get super invested in a Stephen King-esque way in the kid, right? Like there's other kids in the circus. There's evils that they have to sort of confront, but you get invested in the Grayson family. And again, like there's this inevitability of his fate. Like you're going to get to a point where the Graysons are going to die, but it's like we wait for 5 seasons to see how it happens. I kind of want to see like a serious show dedicated to that.
5 seasons.
Well, I'm ballparking here, like Breaking Bad was 5 seasons, and we watch Walter White transition significantly. What if Dick transitions significantly for 5 seasons?
And if, hey, it's a traveling circus, you can go to Star City. You can stop by Smallville, and your classic like small town circus comes. I got you. I'm seeing the vision.
So many things you could do with this.
So okay, I think my next one is Cyborg goes back to college on a technicality to reclaim his football scholarship. And there's no rules against people with prosthetics like Air Bud style. There's no rules against somebody with prosthetics playing in the league. And so he must earn his team's trust and modulate his skills in order.
This is like is this like a Friday Night Lights type thing?
Yeah, sure. It could be gritty like Friday Night Lights. It could also be just like super squeaky clean, like that arc in Smallville where Clark was, like, I want to play football, and Jonathan was like, you have superpowers, you're gonna break someone's neck.
Right.
Could be one or the other. Whatever they're vibing with. Whatever. Hey, Saffron, Gunn, whatever you want, man.
You know what I envision in that show? I envision another kid on the other team, the rival team, who puts himself through like severe body transformations to try to keep up with Victor, right? And it becomes a Jekyll and Hyde, battle on the football field.
Monsteroid rage.
I kind of love this. Yeah, I kind of dig this.
Okay. All right. Well, my my number is very accessible. So DC, if you want to call me up, I got.
I'm not. Your phone might be ringing pretty soon. All right. I have one more really super goofy pitch, which I've kept.
Yeah.
And again, we've almost proven over the years that anything could become a TV show, right? Like, and there's no like. There have been some far-fetched pitches where we're like, really? We're following that character, for a whole thing. There's a character from the Batman mythology, the movies specifically, that I want to know their backstory. I don't care how long it takes to get into their backstory. But if you remember in Batman and Robin, when Mr. Freeze broke into the vaults early on in the movie and was trying to escape with the diamond, he had henchmen that knew how to ice skate. Right. And I want a series dedicated to these people as they trained. I just want to watch them training. I want to see them getting better at it. I want to, like, initially they have to be really bad. It's a Karate Kid-esque thing, where Mr. Freeze is teaching them certain things and they don't even realize they're learning, but then all of a sudden they can skate, There's rivalries within the team of who's like going to get closest to Freeze. There might be like a Tanya Harding situation where someone, mid-season gets whacked because they're villains, right?
Yeah,
like,
no rules.
Taken out. But like, how did they get to the point where they are masters of skating to help Mr. Freeze? And it gives Arnold a chance in a nostalgic way to come back, drop some more amazing ice puns on us. Like, this is a franchise that's waiting to happen. So
I have 2 more, but my next one
hit me, please.
Is Oswald Cobblepot owns a bar and it's supervillain Cheers.
Oh, that's amazing. That's great.
You could just, and honestly, I think that this actually would just be really funny as like it. I think that they should keep Colin Farrell as the Penguin. He just owns a bar, and it's honestly just a web series, and it's just like alongside every DC property, like you just sort of have the villains come into the bar and like low-key like joke and make talk, and it could just be like updated as every single movie comes out. It's like part of the promo, and it's like, oh, I'm just dealing with Superman these days, and it's like Lex Luthor is getting drunk after hours with Penguin. You know what I mean? I just feel like that. I think that'd be fun.
I would watch the heck out of that. I think that'd be amazing. All right, I'm out of pitches, so give me your wildest one. Give me the one you saved for the very end.
The one I saved for the very end is the most I feel like the most random character, just because like if we're doing Jimmy Olsen, who's a character that like truly like who the hell even knows who this is unless you were as obsessed with the Gail Simone episode of Justice League animated series as I was. It is about the Question. And it is an Agatha Christie-style detective fiction not noir. I mean, gentleman detective style, solving random mysteries, but annoying superheroes every single episode. He's just driving everyone insane. No one likes this man.
Oh, so like, it's not, because I immediately envisioned the Daniel Craig movies that they're making, that he makes with Ryan Johnson now. But he's like, people love that guy.
Well, this is the thing. It's that, but like, no one likes the Question. The Question is a conspiracy theorist nut job. Everyone thinks he's so annoying. And I think that's like the twist that makes it the Question. You know, it's like he's only right when he's being his like most absurd. But he's like wrong a lot. And I think that's a really funny spin on like the Agatha Christie style. Like he kind of, you know what I mean? I just think that that's funny. Really cool.
I'm down for an Agatha Christie style mystery any single time. So if you're going to involve superheroes in it. And you know what this proves to me, Sierra? The genre is so elastic that you could legitimately do almost all of these. Like supervillain Cheers is just, it's waiting to, you know, be written, essentially. It almost writes itself.
I'm writing it right now as we speak, you know, just for fun, fan fiction.
I mean, I think Zach Krieger, who did Weapons, when he was doing press for it, had an idea for like a henchman movie that involved like Joker and Harley. And, you know, so there's people who are thinking along these lines. I kind of love it.
I think, yeah, there's something fun about doing these obscure characters. And I just, you know, I think, hey, the budgets can reflect that. For the budget for every Superman movie, you could have like 10 low budget indie stuff that's under the brand. I'm just saying.
Maybe we talked ourselves into the Jimmy Olsen show working. I'm starting to come around. But look, in addition to all of these absurd pitches, there is a really good comic out there that you guys should check out based on this episode. So make sure you're grabbing Batman Static Beyond. And again, like I said, just getting off the ground with Evan Narcisse. He's launching that series. Next week on Heroes Journey, we're getting into some more crossovers as well, too. Some exciting news, because we had some folks from Legendary Comics and Legendary Studios and the IP that they're dealing with over there. They're going to dig into a lot of things, including some really cool stories about how Godzilla and King Kong crossed over with the Justice League, and it believe it or not, started with a pitch very similar to Sierra and I sitting around spitballing ideas at the wall of just saying like, hey, how do we get this person to cross over with that person? So make sure you guys are tuning into next week's episode of Heroes Journey by doing us a favor, hitting subscribe to the channel, turning on your notifications, leaving comments down below. That's really helpful for us. We'd love to engage with you guys down there. If you guys have some bizarre superhero pitches to match ours, or if there's any ones that we pitched out there that you guys like in particular, let us know in the comments down below.
Well, we really do read them, and Sean is very good at responding to them.
As long as they're nice. Let's keep it.
We like politeness.
Nice. People. We like politeness. Sierra's our resident Canadian. So until next week, we'll be back with more Heroes Journey. Thanks, guys, for checking us out. We'll talk to you soon.